I want you to picture a scene. It's late at night in a quiet, heavy London house. The servants are, well, they're huddled together downstairs.
Right, they're completely terrified.
Exactly. And upstairs, behind a locked door, a man, or, what's left of him, is pacing back and forth. He's desperate. He's weeping. And on the desk in that room, there is a packet of papers sealed with this.
With a grim sort of finality. It's the kind of image that just stays with you.
It really is.
And what we are looking at isn't just a will. It's not just a suicide note either. It is a scientific log of a soul tearing itself apart. We have finally arrived at the very last chapter of the dossier, Henry Jekyll's full statement of the case.
We've spent the last few deep dives looking at this mystery from the outside. We've been the confused lawyer, Utterson. We've been the terrified friend, Lanyon. But this is the view from the inside.
This is the confession.
Yeah, this is the confession.
And it's arguably the most important piece of the puzzle. I mean, this is Dr. Jekyll explaining the how and the why behind the absolute nightmare of Edward Hyde. It's his posthumous attempt to justify the unjustifiable.
So that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to narrate and unpack the tragic arc of Henry Jekyll. We're going to walk through this chronologically for you, from his initial philosophical experiments to his inevitable doom.
Because we really want to understand the mechanism of the fall. How a desire for absolute freedom turned into a prison of absolute terror.
It's a heavy one, but it's so necessary. To really understand the horror of the end, we have to go back to the beginning. And honestly, the most surprising thing for me every time I read this is Jekyll's background.
Oh, absolutely.
I think there's this pop culture assumption that Jekyll was this pure, saintly figure who was just corrupted by a bad chemical.
Right, like he was an innocent victim of science.
Yeah.
But the text tells a very different story. He starts his confession by listing his privileges. He was born to a large fortune. He was talented. He says he was inclined by nature to industry.
He had everything going for him.
Everything. But then he admits to something crucial. He had a profound duplicity of life.
That word duplicity, that is the key to his entire character.
It really is. He wasn't born evil, but he wasn't satisfied with being just good either. He writes about having an impatient gaiety of disposition. Basically, he had urges.
He liked his pleasures.
Exactly. But because he wanted to be this grave, respected, high society doctor, he felt he had to hide those pleasures entirely.
It sounds exhausting. He says he concealed his pleasures with an almost morbid sense of shame. So he's living a double life long before Edward Hyde ever shows up. He feels like he's wearing a mask every single day.
And that pressure cooker, that constant friction between who he wanted to be seen as and who he actually felt he was, that is what leads him to his famous theory. He's reflecting on his own hypocrisy, and he realizes that man is not truly one, but truly two.
And that is the hinge of the entire story. He calls them polar twins struggling in the agonized womb of consciousness.
Such a violent image.
It is. But his solution is almost practical in a twisted sort of way.
It's incredibly practical. He thought, what if I could just separate them? His logic was that if he could house these identities in different bodies, the just side could walk upward and be a good doctor, and the unjust side could go do whatever it wanted, completely stripped of that morbid shame.
He viewed it as a way to relieve the burden of life.
Yeah, he thought he was solving the human condition.
So he turns to science to solve a moral problem. He hits the lab. He finds that the physical body is just a vestment, a curtain that can be shaken by certain agents. And then comes that cinematic moment.
The creation of the potion.
Right. He buys the salt, he mixes the potion, watching it boil and smoke, and late one accursed night, he drinks it.
Now, in the movies, this is usually a quick morph, bit of makeup and lighting. But in the text, the description of that first transformation is so visceral. It's not magical, it's agonizing.
He describes racking pangs, a grinding in the bones.
And a deadly nausea.
Yeah.
He says there was a horror of the spirit that couldn't be exceeded at the hour of birth or death.
He is literally tearing his biology apart. But then, and this is the part that always chills me, the pain stops. And he doesn't feel like a monster. He feels great.
That is the seduction. He says he felt younger, lighter, happier in body. He describes a heady recklessness. He realized that while Henry Jekyll was a composite of good and evil, this new creature, Edward Hyde, was pure evil.
He calls it tenfold more wicked, sold a slave to my original evil.
And the really scary part, Jekyll drank it in like wine. He stretched out his hands and exulted in the freshness of it. He felt free.
Because for the first time in his life, the restraints were off, and then he notices something physically. He's not just mentally different, he's physically smaller.
Right, and there's no mirror in the lab, so he has to sneak across the courtyard to his own bedroom just to see himself.
Which is such a creepy image to me, this stranger stealing through his own house at night. When he finally looks in the glass, he sees Edward Hyde. He's smaller, slighter, and younger. And Jekyll has a specific theory for why that is, doesn't he?
He does. He believes that because his evil side had been less exercised and less exhausted than his good side over his lifetime, the evil body was underdeveloped. It was a smaller part of his soul, so it produced a smaller body.
It's a fascinating bit of metaphysical biology.
It is. And unlike everyone else who looks at Hyde and immediately wants to scream or throw up, Jekyll looks in the mirror and feels a leap of welcome.
He says, "This too is myself."
It seemed natural to him.
And that is the tragedy right there. He didn't reject the evil, he embraced it as a vital part of his identity. So the experiment works, and now he has to set up the logistics. This is where the double life really begins to rot him from the inside.
It's incredibly calculated. He rents that house in Soho for Hyde. He hires a housekeeper he knows is silent and unscrupulous. He sets up the bank account.
He even draws up that will that terrified everyone earlier in the book, ensuring that if Jekyll disappeared, Hyde would get everything.
He was building a safety net for his vices. And this leads to a psychological trap that he just didn't see coming. He calls it vicarious pleasure.
When he was Hyde, he could indulge in things that were undignified and eventually monstrous. But when he drank the potion and woke up as Dr. Jekyll, he felt like he hadn't done anything.
It's the ultimate dissociation. He says it was Hyde, after all, and Hyde alone that was guilty. Jekyll would wake up, his conscience seemingly clear. He'd even try to undo the evil Hyde caused, maybe make a donation to charity thinking that balanced the books.
He mentions the incident with the child, the trampling we heard about in the very first chapter. For Jekyll, looking back, that wasn't a moral crisis.
Not at all. It was just an annoyance because he had to use Jekyll's checkbook to pay off the family, which risked exposure. That's why he opened the second bank account. It wasn't about guilt. It was about avoiding getting caught.
He thought he was untouchable, beyond the reach of fate, he says. But then comes the turning point, the hand on the sheet.
This is one of the most effective scenes in the entire text. It shifts the genre from science fiction to pure psychological horror.
Let's set the scene for now. He's been out as Hyde, but he came home, drank the potion, and went to sleep as Henry Jekyll. He wakes up in his own bed, in his respectable house. It's a yellow, foggy London morning. He's just lying there, half asleep. And he looks at his hand on the bedsheet.
Now remember, Henry Jekyll's hand was professional. Large, firm, white, manicured. A surgeon's hand. But the hand he sees lying on the coverlet is lean, corded, knuckly, of a dusky pallor, and thickly shaded with a swart growth of hair.
It was the hand of Edward Hyde.
And he says the terror was as startling as the crash of cymbals. He hadn't taken the drug. He had gone to bed as Jekyll and woken up as Hyde. The transformation was becoming involuntary.
The panic in the narration here is palpable. He has to run to the mirror to confirm it. His blood just turns to ice. And then the practical panic sets in. The servants are up. The drug is all the way in the cabinet in the laboratory across the courtyard.
He has to figure out how to get from his bedroom to the lab without being seen.
He manages it, covering his face and sprinting through the halls. But once he's back in the lab and transformed, he realizes the balance is shifting.
The Hyde side is growing stronger. It's been fed too much. He says it felt like the lower side was beginning to absorb the higher one. He has to make a choice.
And he tries. We do have to give him credit. He decides to choose the elderly and discontented doctor over the liberty and youth of Hyde. He locks the door, stomps on the key, and tries to live a good life.
He lasts for 2 months. He leads a life of severity. But the addiction is there. He says the lower side began to growl for a license. And in an hour of moral weakness, he mixes the potion again.
And because he's been abstaining, the result is catastrophic. He says, "My devil had been long caged. She came out roaring."
That repression made the explosion of violence inevitable. This is the night of the Carew murder. And listening to Jekyll describe it is disturbing. He wasn't acting in self-defense. He says he felt a transport of glee.
He mauled the body, tasting delight with every blow.
It's absolute brutality. But then right at the peak of this delirium, the cold thrill of terror strikes him. He realizes what he's done. His life is forfeit.
He flees to Soho, destroys his papers, and drinks the potion, praying to God with tears of gratitude as he turns back into Jekyll.
That split glorying in the crime as Hyde, then weeping in gratitude as Jekyll, it shows the total fracture of his mind. He thinks he's safe because Hyde is the murderer, not Jekyll. If he just stays as Jekyll, he's fine. Ideally, Hyde is gone forever now because the gallows are waiting for him.
But the control is gone, and that leads to the final slide into the abyss, the Regent's Park incident. This part always haunts me because there are no drugs involved initially. It's purely mental.
It is the definitive proof that the drug wasn't the only trigger anymore. It's a fine January day. Jekyll is sitting on a bench in the park, and his mind starts to wander. He starts thinking vainglorious thoughts.
He compares himself to other men, thinking about how good he is compared to their lazy cruelty.
Talk about pride coming before a fall.
Wow.
He's literally patting himself on the back for being a charitable person.
And that thought, that arrogance, triggers the change. No potion, just the darkness of his own ego. The nausea returns, the shuddering. He looks down. His clothes are suddenly hanging formless on his shrunken limbs.
He's Hyde, in public, in broad daylight, surrounded by people, and he's a wanted murderer.
The logistics of this escape are frantic. He can't go home. The servants know Hyde and will call the police. He can't go to the lab. He has to hide. He hails a cab and goes to a hotel.
And this is where we see the two personalities interacting in a new way. Hyde is terrified. He's chattering to himself, hunting by his fears.
He has to write to Dr. Lanyon, his old friend, to go break into Jekyll's cabinet and get the drugs. We talked about Lanyon's perspective in a previous deep dive, but hearing it from Jekyll's side reveals the sheer desperation. Hyde writes the letter, but in Jekyll's handwriting.
Which was the one part of his original character he retained. He spends the whole day in that hotel room, gnawing his nails, terrified of capture. At night, he wanders the streets, and we get this glimpse of pure malice. He smites a woman in the face just for offering him matches.
Just pure, unprovoked cruelty born of fear.
He eventually gets to Lanyon's, mixes the drug in front of him, and transforms back. But the safety is temporary. He goes home, but he's a broken man.
This is the final doom. The drug begins to fail. He has to double the dose, then triple it. And worst of all, he can't sleep.
If he dozes off for even a moment, the will relaxes and he wakes up as Hyde.
He describes himself as a creature eaten up and emptied by fever. He's living in the laboratory, pacing back and forth. And the relationship between the two identities shifts into pure hatred.
This is fascinating. Hyde hates Jekyll because Jekyll is the only reason he can't be free. Jekyll is the city of refuge, but also the prison. Jekyll hates Hyde because Hyde is, in his words, inorganic, the slime of the pit. Amorphous dust.
They're trapped in the same body, tormenting each other, and Hyde starts getting petty, doesn't he? We hear about these ape-like tricks.
Yes, it's not just big acts of evil anymore, it's spite. Hyde would scrawl blasphemies in Jekyll's own handwriting in his favorite religious books. He burned the portrait of Jekyll's father.
It's self-destructive.
Completely. Hyde would ruin them both, just to hurt Jekyll, but his fear of the gallows keeps him in check. He knows if he destroys Jekyll completely, Hyde hangs.
Jekyll actually says he finds it in his heart to pity Hyde because the creature's love of life is so desperate. That's a strange moment of empathy in the middle of a nightmare.
It shows that Jekyll is still the human one. He can feel pity. Hyde can only feel fear and hate.
And then comes the final nail in the coffin, the salt.
The salt. This is the scientific twist that seals his fate. He runs out of the original supply he bought years ago. He sends his servant, Poole, all over London to find more, but every new batch he tries, it fails.
There's no ebullition, no color change, it just sits there inert.
And the realization hits him. It wasn't the formula that was special.
No. The original batch, the one he used for all those experiments, must have had an unknown impurity.
It was an accident. The discovery wasn't pure science. It was a fluke, a mistake at the chemical factory.
That is the ultimate irony. He can never repeat it. He is now using the very last grains of the old powder. He knows that once this wears off, he will become Hyde forever. And since Hyde is wanted for murder, that means death.
So we reach the very end of the manuscript. He's sitting in his cabinet. He has about half an hour before the last dose wears off. He's writing as fast as he can, knowing the clock is ticking.
It's a suicide note, but it's incredibly complex. He says Henry Jekyll can think his own thoughts or see his own face for the last time. He knows that when the change comes, the person known as Henry Jekyll ceases to exist.
He wonders what Hyde will do. Will he kill himself? Will he die on the scaffold? But then he says, I am careless. It doesn't matter to him anymore.
Because that concerns another than myself. He is entirely disowning the future.
And that final sentence? Here then, as I lay down the pen and proceed to seal up my confession, I bring the life of that unhappy Henry Jekyll to an end.
It is incredibly poignant. He didn't die when the body died. He died when he laid down the pen. The moment the transformation took him that last time, the man was gone. Only the monster remained to face the consequences.
I think the most chilling takeaway for you to consider is that the impurity wasn't just in the salt. It was in the assumption that we can ever truly separate our darkness from our light. Jekyll thought he could distill himself into pure good and pure evil, but the text shows us that the good Jekyll was always complicit, and the evil Hyde was always tethered to him.
You can't just lock the bad part of yourself in the basement and expect it to stay quiet.
Exactly. When you try to separate them, you don't purify the good, you just unchain the monster.
And on that terrifying note, we're going to close the file on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It has been a wild ride through the fog of Victorian London. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure. Watch out for those mirrors.
We'll see you next time.